We're back, and today we're talking about your secret superpower. Yeah, you may not know you have it, but you do. And when I tell you what it is, you may not like me anymore. Your secret superpower is forgiveness. It's beautiful when it's demonstrated. It changes life. It changes your life. One simple act of forgiveness can set you free. So, where do we begin? Let's begin with the reality that there's pain in life. 1 Peter 1 says, "So be truly glad. There's wonderful joy ahead, even though you must endure many trials for a little while. These trials will show that your faith is genuine." There is pain in this life, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. People will hurt you. Most of them, the vast majority of them, meant no harm, but you were still hurt. There were some, however, that were intentional in hurting you, and that's terrible, and it's not fair, and it's not just, but it is what it is. When we're unforgiving, we move into a place of bitterness, and we become a judge. We take on the role of judge. And if you think about it, that's really offensive to the actual judge, the King of Kings. He says in Romans chapter 12:19, through the hand of Paul in the Message translation, "Don't insist on getting even. That's not for you to do. I'll do the judging," says God. "I'll take care of it." Today we want to talk about two sons real quick. The son who was ruined and the son who was victorious. The first one's a son named Absalom. Absalom's story is a tragedy. His sister Tamar was raped by his half-brother Amnon. Horrible injustice. A crime was committed. Something needed to be done. When it happened, the Bible tells us in 2 Samuel 13, and though Absalom never spoke to Amnon about this, he hated Amnon deeply because of what he had done to his sister. You see, when this happened to Tamar, Absalom got bitter. He didn't try to deal with the problem. He just got mad at the injustices that took place. He felt like Amnon certainly committed a crime and needed to be punished. He felt like his father, the king, King David, did not handle the issue well enough, at least not in the way that Absalom would have. And it created a terrible bitterness in his life and an unforgiveness that led to the murder of Amnon. And then later, when Absalom should have been punished for a crime, the king forgave him. Absalom's heart just steeped even deeper in bitterness toward King David, and he planned an overthrow of the kingdom. In doing so, he brought his own life to a premature end and was killed by one of his better friends. So here's a guy named Absalom in the Bible who moved in unforgiveness and bitterness, thinking that he was the only one who could minister justice correctly, and he ended up dying for it. It ends up a tragedy. So that's the ruin of a son. But there's another son in the Bible. His name was Joseph. And Joseph was victorious. The story of Joseph stinks. His brothers were jerks. In fact, they probably win the Worst Brothers Ever award. And you probably thought it was yours. But these guys attacked Joseph. They beat him up. They threw him in a hole. They sold him into slavery. And in that slavery, he served in a house in Egypt, far away from home, learned the ways of Egypt. In that home, he ends up in prison because he was falsely accused. And then he's forgotten. He's left there for a long period of time until finally one day, poof, he's actually made the second in charge of the entire nation. Weird story, strange story, painful story. If I were Joseph, I'd have a lot of bitterness. I want a little bit of getting even going on in my life. And what happens in Genesis 45 is he gets his chance. His brothers come to him. In Genesis 44, you can read the story. His brothers come to him needing food, and they don't recognize who he is. Had it been Absalom, it would have been a great time for revenge. But that's not what Joseph did. In fact, in Genesis 45:1, it says, Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. In that little snippet of the story that happened, where you could read and see Joseph struggle as he went back and forth and struggled with what to do with his brothers. But he finally came to a place where he decided to let God be the judge, to let the past stay in the past, and he brought his brothers near. And he didn't just bring them near, he blessed them, and he cherished them, and he saved their entire family. So you have one ruined son, Absalom, who ended up destroying his life and who is quickly forgotten. And then you have this forgiving son who becomes a national hero and saves his family. Two different stories that went two very different ways. So let me ask you a question. Can you forgive? Ephesians 4:31 says, "Get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, harsh words, and slander, as well as all types of evil behavior. Instead, be kind to each other, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, just as God through Christ has forgiven you." So when I ask you the question, can you forgive? It was a trick question. Yes, you can forgive. You're empowered to forgive. You have within you a spirit of power and love and self-control. So yes, you do have the ability to forgive someone. But forgiveness isn't ignoring a problem or an offense. Forgiveness isn't giving people immediate and open access to you. Forgiveness is not putting untrustworthy people in places where they can do greater harm. It isn't those things. Forgiveness is recognizing that an offense happened, that it was wrong, that it hurt. Forgiveness does state the pain and the wrongness of the pain. And the main thing that forgiveness does for you is it sets you free. To refuse to set others free and hold them indebted to you makes you some kind of debtor, a lien holder, record keeper over their life. It's very stressful and creates all kinds of anxiety. So what should you do? Who should you forgive? Of course, you should forgive people who have hurt and offended you, remembering it was likely unintentional. When you do forgive these people, remember what you're doing is you're moving the case, the offense, out of a courtroom that you have no authority over into the courtrooms of heaven, where there is a just, righteous, loving, and merciful judge, and who happens to be your Father. So who should we forgive? We should forgive those who've hurt and offended us. We should also forgive people who ask for mercy. That can be hard, because sometimes when people ask you for forgiveness, you don't think they mean it. You have a record of them doing wrong, asking forgiveness, and on it goes. But even Peter asked Jesus about that question one time. He said, "How many times should I forgive someone?" And Jesus basically said, "Indefinitely." But remember, forgiveness isn't access. Forgiveness is something else. Forgiveness sets you free. It removes you from a job you don't want as a bookkeeper of rights and wrongs in your life. So when people ask you, remember, they don't owe you anything. God's the only one we owe. So I should forgive others who've hurt me. I should forgive people who've asked for mercy. I should forgive myself. I should forgive the people who are me. The past versions of me who've made the present version of me suffer so much, making bad choices that have impacted my life. And the failures that I regret and wish I'd never had. Learn to forgive yourself. And this last one may sound a little bit crazy, but I only mention it because it's one that we actually struggle with, but we're generally afraid to say. And that's, we need to forgive God. I know, it sounds like blasphemy, and maybe it is, because it sounds so ridiculous, because God is only, theologically, we understand that God has only intended love and kindness and perfection for us. But practically, God doesn't do things the way we want. God has mercy on people that need to be punished. God doesn't do things the way I would do things if I were God. And when you say it out loud, you realize how ridiculous it sounds. And you remember that the same God who was merciful to someone you think should be punished has also been incredibly merciful to you, who should also be punished. So let it go. Let God be God. A sovereign God greatly frustrates his sons and daughters who don't understand what he's up to. And so let that go. And learn to let go of any grudge you might hold against God. So let me close today with this thought. What does your prayer need to be like today? What do you need to pray about? Who do you need to release? And how can you walk in greater forgiveness? What a superpower. I'll talk to you soon.